So let me start with this. You have already understood the question. I introduced it yesterday. And the question basically is, what is the use of all this knowledge about ancient, in quotation marks, ancient India? Is it really useful at all? What purpose does it serve? Why should you spend time A quick reminder for the newcomers. One, please hand over your essays to Divita. Number two, at 4 o'clock, we'll have a course feedback from the students. Dr. Prabhakar will come for the purpose. All right. So this is the big question. Did we waste our time doing this course? Or does it serve any purpose apart from giving you a few credits? Why should we spend time studying stuff from ancient India? So first of all, before I tackle the question precisely, I want to set a broader context. A few years ago in Tamil Nadu, we had an education minister who suddenly declared that studying history is a waste of time. What purpose does it serve? How does it give you jobs? How does it help you? So let us scrap, he said. Let us scrap history from the textbooks and the curriculum. Doesn't serve any purpose. And why not? Think about it. You see, this is this question of which Manas was calling utilitarianism yesterday. If we're going to go strictly by what is useful, now we'll have to define useful later. Why not? I mean, we can't say offhand that he is wrong. We have to justify why he is wrong. In fact, a few years ago, I was giving a talk in one Indian Institute of Management on Indian ethics. And one of my classes was on the ethics which we can make out from Ashoka's edicts. You know that Ashoka gave a lot of edicts spread all over India, almost. And in that, he spelled out a certain number of values and guidelines for living according to what he called dharma. So then I put a small essay, and I got a lot of very funny. It was not about history. You know, I had, of course, given the dates of Ashoka and so on, but among the replies I got, and please, this was to MBA students, there were very funny answers, which actually tend to prove the Tamil Nadu education minister right. Some of the answers, for example, was that Ashoka, who lived, as I'm sure you all know, in the 3rd century BC, was very tolerant towards all religion, including Islam. Another answer, never mind that Islam came 1,000 years later, it didn't matter. And one of the most brilliant comments was that Ashoka was a great Mughal ruler. So when you see this coming from postgraduate students who are going to get the MBA, you really wonder if it is any use studying history at all. And these bright boys and girls, they were bright in their own way. We're going to get, you know, top managers, post bankers, this, that. And they will still think that, some of them at least, that Ashoka perhaps was a great Mughal ruler. So you wonder, what use is it to them? Probably no use at all. Let us go further. What about literature? Say maybe you had to mug up a few sentences by Shakespeare in your schooling, or by any other author. Is it really necessary? Does it help you? Does it bring you anything? So you can see that we can start asking more and more questions of this kind. What is the use of philosophy? We had, in fact, a few lectures on Indian philosophical systems, and in fact, as a student myself, when in my last year at school, equivalent of +2, we had a course of philosophy, and unfortunately our teacher was not very, very exciting, so he made it really painful. And I really wondered what's the use of it all. And I got pretty disgusted with Western philosophy, mainly because of that teacher. I suppose if I'd had a very brilliant teacher, it would have been different. But you wonder, I mean, why do I need all that? Why should I spend time? What's the use of art while we are at it? Let's enlarge further and further. Is it necessary to know about monuments, to know about Carnatic music, or what are the principles of Bharatanatyam and so on? So, why remain about humanities? We can even extend the debate to science. There's a lot of science that is pretty useless, with quotation marks. It doesn't serve any practical use. We have people at IIT Gandhinagar doing research on the Big Bang and gravitational waves and black holes. It doesn't serve any purpose. Maybe they could argue that they will develop theories that will have applicability in other fields of science. Yes, possibly, but that is anyway quite far away. So basically, it doesn't serve any immediate purpose. That is for sure. And in fact, one of them whom I spoke to, our friend Sudipto, when one day he said, what I'm doing is completely useless. You know, it's exciting for him, but it doesn't help solve, let us say, the immediate water crisis in Ahmedabad or things like that, all right? So, what is the use of this? Some of you came for that field trip the other day to Rani Ki Vav, and we saw this extraordinary well. What is the use? Why could they not just dig a well? If the well is for water, why should you engage hundreds of sculptors, hundreds, not 1 or 2 or 10, bring huge blocks of stone from far away, have them laid on the ground, create a curve out of them, pre-calculated curve, then carve out all these magnificent panels, then lower down all these segments of circles into the well, which must have been a tremendously difficult feat, technologically speaking, and assemble them apparently without any gap. Why should you do that? It is useless. Again, I am continuing my argument about what is useful and what is useless. Manas, we are talking about utilitarianism, for your information. So there is, of course, an easy, broad answer, very broad, which is that culture is what enriches you. All right? If you are cultured, you have more knowledge, you have more aesthetic sensibilities, you can be, responsive to what you perceive to be beautiful and so on. You can also have more values in your life. You can have something that helps you build a character, a personality. All these answers have been given. There's nothing new in this. And therefore, it makes sense to acquire some culture, though we have still not proved its usefulness. And if you're going to accept that broad truth that it is better to have some culture than to be completely uncultured and know absolutely nothing about the world, then why not start at home? This is also logical. When I was a student in France again, we had courses of, at school level, courses of literature, of history, and most of it was exclusively about France, French literature, French history. It's only in the latter years that there was a little bit of looking out beyond, but basically the system wanted you to know something about the country. And it was not about chauvinism, it was just common sense that you live in this country, why don't you know something about it? Why don't you know some of the great figures? Even our profs of physics and mathematics, I remember, never missed an opportunity to, highlight some great contribution of a great French mathematician or physicist. And sometimes they would give a small nugget of history around him or her. So, last question, again, as a broad answer to from those who defend culture, is life worth living without some culture and values? If you impoverish your life so much that you know only this much of banking techniques that allow you to get into a job, what are you going to be happy at the end of 50 years of banking, let us say? And in fact, I have met many people, and this has been one of the interesting testimonies I have seen myself, I've seen many people towards the end of their life or in their retired life. Certain people who were successful according to the common criteria of success, who'd had a good academic life, good awards and so on, and everything was apparently successful, and then they would tell me, my life has been a failure. I've done, what have I done? There's nothing I can. So basically, this whole question leads you ultimately, if you really start digging seriously, to what makes life worth living. This is the question. Now, oh yes, and even without being so philosophical and being philosophical at this level, let us go back to a very pragmatic level. One day I was shocked when, I was teaching in one IIM for 3 years. And I give courses on, because I'd been asked by the director to give courses on ancient Indian culture and society. So I gave those courses, and I would always meet in the guest house professors of finance, economics, systems, this, that, notions of which I know strictly nothing. And they would look at me with a little curiosity, but of course everybody is very polite in India, so it went well. But one day, when I told the professor, he was a marketing professor, I told him I'm teaching Indian culture. He said, that's very important. I was very surprised. I said, why? He said, if you don't know the culture of a country, you cannot do good marketing. It's impossible. So he didn't have time to elaborate, but that suddenly startled me, and I thought, well, maybe culture is something useful after all, if you can do marketing. So these are some of the various perspectives that you can look at it from. Now, I want to look at more precisely our course here. And this course is obviously intended, as you have understood, to supplement a gap, a void. In fact, if we'd had an ideal educational system in India, you would not have needed this course at all. Because you should have, according to my conception of education, of good education, you should have already been familiar, maybe not experts, maybe not scholars, but at least you would have had to have some smattering of everything we discussed throughout this course, whether it was the philosophical system, the architecture, the Ayurveda, etc. So, what is exactly wrong with this Indian educational scene? Now, in green in the first column, I have put, this is an expanding table, from slide to slide it will expand. I have put the particular academic field and what students are missing. Now, in this field, which is, let us say, the sciences, the pure sciences, more or less, absolute blank. It's only in the last 2-3 years that NCERT has introduced in textbooks. I don't know if you people ever came across snippets, what they call snippets, small sidebars where there are 10 lines, or not even 10 lines, 5 lines about Aryabhatta or Brahmagupta, so that at least the students will have encountered their names, but that's all. At best, they will encounter the names of Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta. They will know nothing about what they did. And why should they not know? In fact, the kind of mathematics that Aryabhatta or Brahmagupta or Bhaskaracharya produced is exactly the kind of mathematics that you learn at school. Exactly. You learn a few more things which were not then. You learn about logarithms which did not exist. You learn about a few more things. But otherwise, maybe up to class 7, 8, 9, there's very little of mathematics that you learn which Brahmagupta or Bhaskaracharya did not work about. So why not use them? I'm not saying that you should teach exclusively through them, but you could bring their contributions at many points. And do you know who said recently students in India should be taught about the great ancient Indian mathematicians like Panini, Pingala? It's very interesting that he says that Panini is a mathematician. He's actually a grammarian, but his whole grammatical system is essentially a mathematical system. Pingala, Hemachandra, Aryabhatta, Bhaskara. Their stories and works inspired me, and I think they would inspire students across India. Many of these works were written in Indian languages in beautiful poetry and contain important breakthroughs in the history of mathematics. Who said that? Yes, it is Manjul Bhargava, this young Indian mathematician. I don't know whether he is Indian or American, but at least he is Indian born, who got the field medal in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, and who came to India, gave series of lectures, and surprised many of his the mathematicians in the audience, where he started praising ancient Indian mathematicians and explained how he got inspired by some of the processes they were following, especially Brahmagupta and Hemachandra, to actually adapt these to his own research. Not that Brahmagupta discovered stuff that Manjul discovered, of course not. His mathematics is far more advanced, but some of the procedures they were following actually gave him ideas. So in that case, ancient Indian mathematicians perhaps is not so useless. In any case, he says that they would inspire Indian students, and I do believe so, if what they did was put across to young school students. I think they would find it very interesting. So you can see in any case that somebody here found their contributions very inspiring. But recently, I came across rather friends brought to my attention. And this is exactly what gives you the whole picture. A syllabus designed by Bangalore University for a course in MSc Mathematics. Okay, MSc Maths, Bangalore University, 2016 or 15-16. And in the syllabus, you have a paper on history of mathematics. In history of mathematics, first of all, you begin with European mathematicians of post-17th century. So you have Gauss and Euler and Laplace and Lagrange and all of them. That's fine. They are, of course, if you study history of mathematics, you have to study something of them. Then, strangely, number two, they are putting something on ancient mathematics. I thought it should have been the other way around. Anyway, it doesn't matter. In ancient mathematics, what do they study? Greek, little bit of Mesopotamian, and Arabic mathematics. And that's all. Not a word on Indian mathematicians. And we are at MSc level, as if people like Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, and all the others never existed. So this gives you really the extent of the symptom, the disease that Professor Kapil Kapoor in his video yesterday alluded to, that is affecting our educational system. And this map, which I prepared some time ago, is the kind of summary of very few of the Indian mathematicians and astronomers who contributed enormously to their sciences. Now, civil engineering, we have a very eminent professor with us. Construction techniques, water management, students will have no idea of what was actually practiced in ancient India. A couple of years ago, a professor here designed a course on earth dams. It was a short course, and a great expert from abroad came to teach this course. It was a high-level course. But then when I bumped into him, I said, I hope you are giving some little background on, earth dams in ancient India, because ancient Indians were very good at building dams and reservoirs and all kinds of water structures, diversion structures, and so on. So he said, no, I have no idea. Why don't you do it? So I ended up giving in his course, which was purely a technical course, advanced. I ended up giving half an hour of background on Indian earth dam. But you see, of course I can do that. I have studied a little bit, but I don't know the modern technique of building earth dams, which he knew. If he had been able to give a talk on ancient Indian earth dams, it would have been far more interesting than what I gave, because he would have immediately correlated with a lot of technical inputs, which I can't do. So this is exactly what is missing. And Can anybody recognize this picture these pictures are from Dholavira, and I would have shown in other lectures. And this is the kind of water management that you had 4,600 years ago here in Gujarat, where this is a storm water drain to harvest rainfall at its peak value, not at its average value, that would be useless, at its peak value. Brief rainfall, but very intense. So you need very, very big structures. This is an underground. And this is the tank which you find at the east of the castle, where 73 meters in length, 30 meters something in width. So colossal structures with series of interconnected underground drains. Rather the underground drains are connecting all these tanks together, so that whenever one tank receives more water, it can pass it on to the other tanks. The whole thing is meticulously thought out, planned, executed again with hundreds of laborers. You have to have a workforce to do these things. And this is what allowed Dholavira to survive for 700 years in a place which is today extremely arid. We think that the climate in those days was less arid than it is today. Nevertheless, to maintain a city, a thriving city of possibly 10 to 15,000 inhabitants in such a remote place, where today we don't have a city and we don't have even a town. We have only hamlets, right? So what does this mean? It means that people were very good at solving their local problems with local solutions. In fact, they had no choice. They had no choice but to solve their local problems with local solutions. Today, what do we do? I'm just like you people, I'm working at the last minute, and this was in the news today. So this is a photo from today. And do you know what this is? Anybody saw the news? Bringing water to Latur, exactly. In Maharashtra, Latur is drought hit. What do? We bring trains of water from however far it may be. So this train is carrying 5 lakh liters. I think it should be more, in fact. That's what the news said. Doesn't matter. And it brings water to Latur just as Narmada brings water to Ahmedabad. See the Narmada here, the Sabarmati here, there is not a drop. Go to Ahmedabad city center, near the Sabarmati ashram, for example. I was there the other day, and you will see plenty of water flowing, giving you the illusion that there is a river. There's no river. This is Narmada water, so we are solving local problems with remote solutions. We are no longer able to do what the Harappans, for example, of course their society was simpler, the population was much less, etc., etc. Nevertheless, they applied the minds to solving local problems with local solutions. And that we are now unable to do. Agricultural science, well, I am not going to talk much about it. We had just the other day, we had A.V. Balasubramaniam, you remember? And from Center for Indian Knowledge Systems. And in fact, these are his center's own photographs on how they have trained farmers in the Kanchipuram district in Tamil Nadu to readopt the old organic farming methods, but streamlined, improved with small machines to generate biopesticides, biofertilizers, and these are some of the consequences. So he has explained that quite well. I don't have to. And what he has done, which is remarkable, is that he has proved the viability of the system. After all, Indians fed themselves. Indian agriculture is something like 9,000 years old. If you start from the most ancient regions, Baluchistan and the Ganges Plains, we have evidence of agriculture about 7,000 BC in both regions. So, for 9,000 years, after all, Indian agriculture has been able to feed its population, even if there was a famine once in a while. So, this is demonstrably viable, sustainable agriculture. There are increasing doubts on the success of the Green Revolution. It was, as Professor Mr. Balasubramaniam explained the other day, Green Revolution was very much necessary because it had to meet an immediate need of great food scarcity, which doesn't exist anymore today. Nevertheless, it introduced a lot of methods, chemical-based methods essentially, that have created immense problems for the health of the soil, for the health of the people, and for the economy, because there are hidden costs of agriculture, such as subsidies in particular, which are unresolved. So certainly this particular knowledge tradition of India is undeniably very valuable. The next is related, of course, ecology and environmental sciences. Now, you see, I've been in India for almost 40 years, and I remember that ecology in the Indian school system was introduced perhaps 15, 20 years ago, not more than that. And it was introduced immediately when students, especially in the geography courses, when school children studied ecology. It was purely through the scientific angle. That is to say, you speak of botany, you speak of climate, etc., etc. That's all very fine, and it is indispensable knowledge. But why not again introduce some of the ancient Indian concepts, since we find them so striking today? In fact, they stimulate a lot of prominent ecological thinkers. The old Indian view of nature or the planet was the symbol of a cow. And why a cow? Because the cow feeds us, nature feeds us. It's as simple as that. And this cow, which contains everything, the whole, eventually the whole universe, but that's another story, is in fact in the Mahabharata. There's a very beautiful passage where you have the earth has taken the shape of a cow, physical shape of a cow, and all species, the humans, the animals, even the asuras, the demons, go to her and milk her. So they all take the milk of this earth, that is to say, what food this earth gives us. But they don't destroy the cow. You see, the cow, we can take the milk of the cow, but not the cow itself. So there's a whole very deep ecological thinking, which of course makes whole of nature sacred, because if it is sacred, then it's going to be easier to respect and to maintain, but which is very practically ecological, because it resulted in a lot of conservation practices. Conservation practices as far as trees and forests were concerned. We have edicts by Ashoka about certain areas in forests which are protected, where hunting is prohibited, where wildlife is protected, taken care of, even medical care will be extended to it, and so on and so forth. And this is confirmed through a lot of inscriptions. So when Europeans came to India, in the colonial period, a lot of them poked fun at Indians, who were tree worshippers, as if it is a supreme insult. But today we are relearning the art of worshipping trees in the sense of promoting, protecting trees as one of the elements of the environment. So I could go on this. In fact, I have a whole lecture or two on this topic. And certainly a lot of the ancient thinking about nature and the need to preserve it is extremely relevant and more relevant. So this is something that we can also learn from. Medicine, I will not spend again any time, for the simple reason that we had 6 hours with Dr. Rama Jayasundar, and she told us about Ayurveda and how it works, and also its applicability, what kind of great efficacy it can have. And this is something which is very easy to establish and which has been established. And therefore, if Ayurveda is a valid medical system, why can it not be introduced, maybe not at school level, but for example, why cannot mainstream medical studies in India include a paper or two on Ayurveda? Why should an MBBS or MD doctor completely ignorant about Ayurveda. It doesn't make any sense. If the system works, then why not integrate it in the educational system? So this is another area where obviously we can learn. Philosophy. Now we had Professor V. N. Jha who told us something about the Indian systems and schools of philosophy. He was not at all concerned, and that is quite right from his perspective, he was not at all concerned with convincing you of their applicability. He wanted to explain the principles. So that he did, and I think it was quite brilliant, and we were all enlightened. But did any of you feel that, well, that's very nice, but it's quite remote from, my concerns, and how can it be of any use? Of course, it can be of great use. And it's for you, in fact, to look for the situations in life where some of these systems can be of immense help. I can give a couple of examples. I'm a little reticent to do that because it looks as if the rest will not be applicable or the situations are always going to be extreme. But still, let me give some examples. For example, you have something called, he did not speak about it much. He did mention it. You have a system called Sankhya, which is one of the favorite systems in the Bhagavad Gita, for example. What is Sankhya? I am no good in Indian philosophy, but I do know that it is based on a division of the universe and the human being, because universe and human beings are always closely interrelated in Indian philosophical systems, into two different concepts. One is the Purusa, and the other is Prakriti. So that is to say, the Purusa is, let us say, sometimes translated as the spirit, the higher being, the true being that we are supposed to have in us, and Prakriti is the external nature, what makes our character, our behavior, our temperament, and so on. And there is a kind of a confusion between the two. In our day-to-day life, the way we are programmed, they are kind of fused together. We can't separate them. But the whole purpose of Sankhya philosophy is precisely to separate them and to make you identify with this and not with that. So what happens when you do that? And it is perfectly feasible. It's extremely practical. Let us assume, for example, that you go through, I don't wish you to do that, but if you happen to live through a big tragedy in your life, so you lose somebody or whatever, life is sufficiently full of tragedies, so there's no need to exert our imagination. You will find that you are totally caught in that, grief or sorrow or difficulty or depression. You're caught in it. You identify yourself with it. Sankhya teaches you, it's a kind of inner exercise, exactly the way you do exercises in the gymnasium here in the gym. You can do exactly the same exercises within you if you just learn the trick. And it teaches you to separate yourself. So you separate yourself, you take your stand in this, not in that. But you can still watch it. It's not that the depression or the tragedy or the grief disappears. It's still there, but you're no longer identified with it. This is something which is of immense practical application. And if you ever remember it in some of these situations, you can just try. It works. It works very well. It's not even very difficult. Just requires a certain habit of going inside and observing yourself. And this is something which is a direct result from Indian philosophical system. Now, the other example which I could take, I'm here looking at practical use, since we have to answer this question, what use can it be? The other example is this, which you are familiar with. also from the Gita. Okay? Desireless action. Is it possible? This is what Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita takes 699 slokas to teach to Arjuna. And it's a paradox, because he says you have to act. You can't say, no, I will not fight. I will follow non-violence. I will sit down, and if my cousins, the Kauravas, want my kingdom, then they take it. You can't do that. You have to fight, because it's not for yourself, it's for the dharma. And therefore you have to go out and fight. So you have to act, karma. You are obliged to act. But the fruit of your action doesn't belong to you, it belongs to me. And that is my concern, not your concern. So your concern is only this, but provided you do not act for a result. You act because this is what your dharma tells you, whether you have the dharma of a ruler, of a parent, the dharma of a student or a teacher. There are so many different dharmas. In Indian literature, if you read one day the entire Mahabharata, you will see endless discussions on what is dharma and what is adharma. And they take immense pleasure in examining all the different situations in which dharma needs to be defined or etc. So you have to act, and this you cannot escape, and you should not escape. So in that sense, the Bhagavad Gita is totally opposite to certain extreme philosophical systems that demanded total withdrawal from the world. It does not. It says, no, you go out in the world and you fight. But you don't fight with any desire even to succeed, even to win. So this is extremely difficult. Imagine that, when you go for placement, you have to be absolutely full of equanimity and totally detached from you do your best, you prepare the best you can, but whether you are successful or you fail, you should be completely indifferent. Is it possible? Well, it is possible, but it's difficult. It requires practice. And in fact, it totally upsets the modern notions of success or failure. The American, they are very much American. They're not European. The notions of being a winner or a loser. These are American terms. And in the view of the Bhagavad Gita, there is no winner, no loser. You never lose. Even if you appear to fail, you have not failed, because you did not. The fruit of your action was not to be decided by you. As long as you have sincerely tried your utmost, that's all. The rest doesn't belong to you. So it's a great consolation. In case of failure, in fact, it totally safeguards you from depression, for example. You see, otherwise, if you go into this philosophy and you happen to be a loser, then the next thing to do is go and hire a psychiatrist. So you no need of psychiatrist with Nishkama Karma. The philosophy takes care of it. So anyway, I could go on. These were just two clumsy examples, if you wish, to show you that there is no doubt about the practical applicability. It's actually for you to find it, and it is undeniable. The next is psychology. Now, in the Indian educational system, again and again I have seen, especially at the university level, I have seen syllabi of psychology, and these are all the 19th and 20th notions of psychology worked out in Europe. Now, there's nothing wrong with them. I am not saying that teaching something that comes from the West is wrong. Of course not. What I keep saying again and again is, why not also teach the Indian thing? What is the Indian equivalent of psychology? It is what is broadly known as yoga. In fact, Bhagavad Gita is full of psychology. It dissects our inner personality, and And then it shows the interplay of all these, you know, inner divisions of what we are made of. And it does give a lot of techniques. I gave an example of one or two, but there are many others. So what about investigating this knowledge? Even if you want to, you know, remove the more or less, what shall I say, the more externally religious part of it, you can do that. You can transform yoga into a system of self-exploration, self-mastery, self-fulfillment, where, let us say, the spiritual part of it will be reduced to its essence. You can remove from it quite a lot of Hindu context if you are uncomfortable with that Hindu context. This is what many people in the West do, actually. When they teach yoga in the West, they clean it out of its Hindu origins. Undeniably, yoga has Hindu origins. But whether you take it with the origins or not is your choice. It makes no difference, essentially, to the efficacy of the techniques. And the techniques are so efficacious. Well, first of all, they are ancient in India, really ancient. Meditation is documented, as far as we can understand, in the Indus civilization. This is the so-called priest king of Mohenjo-daro, deliberately depicted in a posture of contemplation. So why is he? Probably neither a priest nor a king, doesn't matter. Nobody knows who is this gentleman, but what he is doing, we can tell. And then we have very interesting anthropological evidence in the form of these skeletons buried in Padmasana. This is from Rajasthan, approximately 1000 BC. Not in the Indus civilization. This Balathal is part of a parallel culture called Ahar Banas. It's a Chalcolithic culture which never moved into the urban stage and which existed on the margins of the Indus civilization and had some exchanges with it. Now, why did people in 1000 BC, you know, bury a few skeletons in Padmasana? We don't know. We don't know, but obviously the posture speaks, and the tradition exists today for certain yogis or swamis who are buried like that. That is still existing today. So was this the case 3000 years ago? We don't know. There is no literature, so we cannot, but there is obviously something. So the tradition is ancient. It is ancient and it is modern. And these are two issues of Time magazine which spoke of some 20 million Americans practicing some form of yoga or meditation. Why should they do it? Why can't they find in their own tradition something that will fulfill them? Obviously there is a need. And if these techniques, of course, repackage, you know that Americans are great repackagers. They will repackage something, patent it, and sell it to you when you can get it free back home. This is what they're very good at. But that's another aspect of things. It's their marketing talent. We're not concerned with that. We're concerned with the knowledge. So if this knowledge is good enough for 20 million Americans, and obviously it is also good enough for millions of Indians who, you know, without talking about it, still practice some form of yoga or the other, then why not make use of it when we speak of psychology? Let me move on. Sorry, this doesn't work very well. Political science, I will not again repeat because I gave at the start, towards the start of this course, if you remember, one brief lecture or two on how ancient political systems in India worked out a few very important democratic traditions. You know, I don't know if you attended the recent Udan event. We had one of our young professors who gave a talk and who spoke about the greatness of democracy which was created in America, you know, at the time of the Declaration of Independence, and that this is what gave us democracy. Well, this was not the occasion to start a scholarly debate. Udan was about something else, but one day I'll catch him and I will tell him that, look, you have to go and study your own traditions before you speak such nonsense. Because maybe we didn't, in ancient India, express things the way, the Declaration of Independence of the US, which is great in its own right. I'm not I'm not criticizing anything Western, but what I say is that we also have declarations of democratic traditions, and I will not remind all of them. You can refer back to my lecture the other day. But whether it was some of the Mahajana Padas, whether it was the Shrenis, the guilds, where elections were taking place, whether it was the Chola administration with systems of assembly where people had a representative voice, these democratic traditions did exist, and it would be useful to know about them, because we could sometimes rethink some of, sorry, I don't know, I may have skipped a slide, just a second. Yeah, so about India as a country, Richard Nixon once said that India is an ungovernable, I think he said an ungovernable chaos, but I'm not sure, I have to search for the exact, so this, in fact it's true that India looks like, seen from outside, very often it looks like a totally chaotic nation which cannot really be governed. But there is a more interesting description of India, well, a functioning anarchy, if you like. There's a more interesting description, which is from a British economist, Joan Robinson, who expresses very well this great paradox to a Westerner of what India as a nation looks like. And she said, whatever you can rightly say about India, the opposite is also true. That's a profound statement, which is worth thinking about. About India's democratic traditions, why is it that India manages, we still, though our newspapers, I know, are full of crime, nevertheless, at the national level, when you see the statistics, in relative terms, India is still a country with low criminality. Because don't forget, we have 1.2 billion people. So it's true that the crime graph is rising, no doubt about it, but till recently it was still quite low. And why is it that this is manageable with just 15,000 police stations across the entire country? Because, which means 1 per 80,000 on average. I think we could do a little project if somebody wanted, comparing, with all the graphs with the various countries across the world. But the point is that even today, if you live in rural India, those of you who live in rural India, you would be aware that the village still regards itself, though it has lost some of its ancient pre-colonial structures, the administrative structures that it had till the pre-colonial era, especially a system of committees where the various villagers belong to various committees, like the committee that would manage the water structures, the committee that would run the temple, the committee that would run a school, and so on and so forth. They were established committees, and this made the whole village like a kind of micro-republic, which is what many historians have commented upon and acknowledged. So there is some remnant of this, where the village continues to live as one, even though most villages, unfortunately, are politically divided now. You have different parties, vying for space. But nevertheless, this is what still permits that, a lot of petty crime is controlled or suppressed or eliminated right immediately at the village level without having to run for a policeman. So it's only serious crimes that, invites police action. Finally, I think it is finally, education. We would have to teach education in our educational system, because we have the impression that the whole educational system is designed in such a way that all the knowledge given to you is basically knowledge from the West. Whether you look at the sciences, whether you look at English, of course, take geography, and almost everything you learn, botany, zoology, etc., comes to you from the West. And again, there's nothing wrong with Western knowledge, but the fact is that we have eliminated all the Indian contributions, and this gives an impression to the Indian student that India is not, it may be a place where, with, you know, beautiful monuments, it may be a place with yogis and sadhus, it may be a place with all kinds of festivals, but it's not a place of knowledge. This is the impression that by default, the education system implants in our minds, even without ever mentioning it. This is what happens. So we should therefore have in history, it would have to come in the history course, something of the great concern that ancient India had for education, which is depicted like you can see in these panels and many more, depicted in inscriptions, with endowments to schools and universities, and of course, you can all, I'm sure, recognize this place. No? Nobody went there? Nobody visited this place here? This is yes, this is Nananda. I deliberately did not show you the great stupa because you would have recognized, but this is where you see how all these are cells where the monks were living, or perhaps students, and it was a huge place. I mean, at least 10,000 students and monks, teachers living together with enormous granaries to store the grain to feed all these people, very big kitchens. I mean, there's a whole organization. And it was, very interestingly, an organization which was first of all self-governing. That is to say, the king did not, as a rule, intervene in it. It was managed by the head monks, and also with some kind of a network of similar monasteries, because after all it's a monastery, like Vikramashila, which was not far away, and many others, Odantapuri and so on. And there was a kind of overall committee to run these affairs. And there was a student body. The Chinese pilgrims who visited Nalanda testified that there was a student body which also was part of the decision making. You see? So it was a very advanced institution, and I think it would inspire young Indians to know more about these things. Of course, the arts, I'm not going to talk about it. This is at least one area which still exists a little bit in our life. Though, please note, I don't think any of you was asked to, you know, give 1 minute dance recital to pass the +2 exam. I don't think you were asked to submit a drawing or a painting. It doesn't matter. It is there as extracurricular in many schools, but it's not regarded as important enough to figure in the exams. And why not? Why can't we have exams with drawing, with say playing one musical instrument or something? You know, it would make perfect sense to me. I have never understood. So still, it is not. It is there, but it's still not, you know, important. So anyway, this I will not spend time. First of all, you understand what I'm trying to say. Number two, I remind you that Sunday, Monday, we have Dr. Chitra Lakshmi Sriram, sorry, Dr. Lakshmi Sriram, who is an accomplished Hindustani and Carnatic singer, a rare combination, as well as a Bharatanatyam dancer, and she will give us a feel of all this. So finally, wait, my slide changer is running havoc. Yes, finally this. Now here, in business and management, we can have a few minutes. Yeah? Yeah. We'll break. I'll just conclude in 5 minutes. Then we'll break, and then we will do the student feedback. There are courses, of course, at school and more so at college level on Indian business management, and we have now introduced something called business ethics. Why do we speak of business ethics? Because American business has introduced the topic of business ethics. Why has American business introduced the topic of business ethics? Because it's highly unethical. It is constantly bending the rule of ethics at every opportunity, and therefore there was a necessity to introduce the concept of ethics. India carried out business for 2,000 years without ever talking about ethics because it was built in the system. The traditional, and there would be, in fact, it would be a fabulous course to put together. Maybe one day I'll do something like that. When you look at all the ancient trade and exchange documented by a lot of especially foreign travelers, Chinese, European, Arab, Greek before them, what do they testify about Indians? Truthfulness and trustworthiness. They say there are testimonies. I have the quotations with me. I can give them to you anytime. That with Indians, with Indian traders, you don't need to sign a document. Their word is enough. If they say that they will sell you at this price, this merchandise, it's good enough. So this is what they find most remarkable. We have those testimonies. They can't be made up. Why should they make it up? So the ethics was built into the system, and this is why you have a number of great Indian industrial houses which are actually built on this system of ethics without even mentioning it. And this is how the Tatas, for example, revolutionized the relation between the employer and the employee. And well, strikes have been pretty much unknown in the Tata houses, completely unknown. But in South also we have a number. I'm not going to go. You can in fact research these people if you like. They are all very eminent industrialists who, I made a mistake. This is not 2017 but 16. I'm sorry. He passed away in fact a month ago. And these are people who basically dedicated their lives not so much to make money. They did make money, but to improve society around in whatever ways possible. So this is based on the ancient Indian concept of artha. Artha is wealth, and artha was put forward as a highly desirable end in India. Highly desirable end, getting rich. However, it was artha with dharma. You know, artha, kama, dharma, moksha. For those of you who know this formula, so it was artha with dharma, not without dharma. Artha without dharma, we all know very well what happens because we see it every day in the newspapers. So this is the distinction. But it's not exclusively about big industrial houses. It's also about very humble systems which have been operative in India and which have been studied as interesting phenomena, not by Indians, but usually by things like organizations like the Harvard Business School, which repeatedly came to India to investigate those surprising practices. For example, the behavior of the Taj Mahal employees who, when the 26/11 attack took place, did not run away. They could have. They could have because they knew the back exits of the hotel. And instead of running away from the terrorists, they stayed. And they stayed and they tried to hide and protect the guests of the hotel as much as they could. And 13 of them lost their lives in the process. And saved, well, I don't know how many lives of guests in the process. And this is something which surprised the HBS people. So they came to India and they conducted it, and they published a report. We didn't do that. Nobody in India went and produced a report on what happened in the minds of those people. And the conclusion was that there was something, first of all, connected to this Indian notion that, you know, Atithi Devo Bhava, right? First of all, but then they also felt that there was this sense of loyalty to the hotel and responsibility to the guest. And well, these are cultural inputs. You may say what you like, you may call it what you like, but these are cultural inputs. And here you have a case, of course, an extreme case, but there are many situations like that in life after all. You have a case where culture can make a difference between life and death. For those guests whose life was saved in the hotel, they would understand suddenly what culture means. Then the same with the Dapawalas. They studied, I think I mentioned it in my lecture on ethics, I will not repeat, the tremendous efficacy but also the trust-based system of the Dapawalas in Mumbai. And this they did in the 1990s, and suddenly after Harvard Business School studied the Dapawalas, everybody in India started studying also the Dapawalas, whom we never even bothered to notice before that. And then these studies also, why is it that, when you have big catastrophes in the US, at least it was reported so, it was later on disputed. I do not know what is the last ultimate truth, but when there was this Katrina hurricane in New Orleans, there were lots of reports across American newspapers about crime and looting and so on and so forth. In India, we've had similar, in fact, far worse catastrophes because in terms of sheer numbers of people affected, it immediately, as you know, in our metropolitans, it immediately becomes millions. So whether it is the great floods of Mumbai in 2005 or last year's floods of Chennai, you don't hear a single report of looting or people taking this opportunity to murder somebody or something like that. I mean, in Chennai, in fact, I was there during the floods, and I have many friends who were directly affected, and I never heard, never once, of such one negative report. In fact, the news we were getting was exactly the opposite, of people helping each other to incredible degrees, youngsters using their ingenuity to create all kinds of rafts and makeshift boats that could take elderlies out of houses. Religious organizations, Jain, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, managing to cook some food and distribute that to neighborhoods and so on and so forth. So these are also, after all, cultural inputs which we need to take into account. So, to sum up and conclude, the victims of Indian educational system, that means all of you here, I use the word victim with quotation marks because the word was used by Ananda Kumaraswamy, who is a great art expert from Sri Lanka in the first half of the 20th century, who wrote voluminously of Indian art and the concepts and philosophy of Indian art. And he said that the victims of the educational system, by which he meant the British educational system in those days, have become totally unable to appreciate Indian art because they've been cut off from it by the system. So I am borrowing this word victim. Please don't feel offended. I don't want to offend anyone, but this is what he said. So what are the symptoms of all this? First of all, there's a loss of self-confidence because, as I said, implicitly, even without your thinking about it, you see the West as the giver of knowledge. That's fine. The West does give knowledge. But first of all, you're unable to identify that knowledge within the Western knowledge which actually originates from other parts of the world. For example, you use the decimal-based numeral notation every day, but you have never been told that actually it's a creation from India. It's a contribution from India. It's not a contribution from the West. And secondly, much worse, you don't know the Indians' contributions to knowledge that you could directly absorb. Second, worse than that, there is a loss of cross-disciplinary thinking. What do I mean by that? The Indian approach was always across several disciplines. For example, we had Professor Ramasubramaniam the other day telling us about poetical or linguistic devices used in Sanskrit by Indian mathematicians, how they mixed mathematics, mnemonics, poetry, metrics, all of it together. So if you learn one discipline when you are obliged to learn so many others, you can't help it. This is of course true of many ancient cultures across the world, but especially true of Indian culture. So that is lost. And it's a great loss because if you are going to have very specialized knowledge within a narrow focus, narrow field, then you are losing a lot. So there's a loss of creativity, which is undeniable as a consequence. And we have a Manjul Bhargava, as I said, winning a Fields medal, but he had to be in the US for that. We don't have many Fields medal winners, maybe one or two back home in India. We have Indians who have been able to get Nobel Prizes in the West, but as scientists, but not as scientists working here in India. So there seems to be something here which discourages the natural aptitudes and talents that the Indians have. Loss of a sense of aesthetics, and this is very striking to people who come to India to admire the great beauty of classical India, the monuments, the textiles. If you have ever time, please visit the Calico Museum in Ahmedabad, run by the Sarabhai family. It's absolutely fabulous. You will just see, for a whole morning, you will be in ecstasy if you have that sensibility about the kind of beauty that was put into textiles. It's absolutely mind-boggling. So you can really spend a lot of time admiring that beauty, but then you will admire all the more, you will wonder all the more, why is it that in our daily life in India today, it is actually ugliness that surrounds us more than beauty. In our cities, our houses, it seems to be something that comes necessarily as part of modern living, but actually there is no such compulsion. Loss of appreciation of heritage. If you go to any heritage site, what will you see first of all? You will see, X loves Y with a heart engraved above a 15th century or sometimes 5th century carving, and so on and so forth. And it looks like a competition among young Indians as to who will leave his or her name more prominently. So this is only one aspect. This is the negative aspect. The fact is that I have taken many groups of students, young students, to heritage sites, and it takes some effort to even get them to notice something. The eyes are not educated. They look, but they don't see. So there is a great loss there, and it is something that is precious to me, and I hope times will change. And finally, loss of time-tested sources of cultural values. Well, we can talk endlessly about that. So with this, I think I will end.